The first page of the story of Fort Pulaski is the War of 1812. Who are we fighting in the War of 1812? The British! And so yeah, the British came back in 1812, and what that war featured was the British Royal Navy, so a bunch of really big ships sailing right up our rivers, attacking our port cities, and in 1814 they burned the White House. And so after we do win narrowly the War of 1812, we got to change some stuff to make sure that that doesn't happen again. We got to do a better job defending ourselves. And so the United States government is going to embark on a project known as the third system of fortifications. They're going to build 42 of these all the way from Maine around to Texas and out on to California. And you're sitting in one of those right now. So Fort Pulaski is chosen to be put on this island known as Cockspur Island. A mile and a half that way is the Atlantic Ocean, and then if you followed the river 12 miles west, you would find the city of Savannah. So they start building the fort in 1829. Wait a minute, I said they. Who am I referring to when I say they? Who's building the fort? U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They're going to be the ones that's building the forts. They're supplying the architects, the engineers, laying out the blueprints and design, and funding the project. But who's digging the foundations of the fort 70 feet below you? Predominantly enslaved men. They're going to be rented out by the United States Army Corps of Engineers from rice plantations nearby. They finished building the fort in 1847. The next 13 years, there's not a whole lot going on. We're not fighting anybody, nobody's fighting us, but the call's about to come from within the house. November 1860, the election of President Abraham Lincoln. And his election was seen as a direct threat to many Southerners who feared that over the course of his administration he will abolish the institution of slavery or at least severely limit its spread. And so as a result of this, 11 Southern states will vote to secede from the Union or separate themselves from the United States so that they can protect their economy, their society, which depends upon the institution of slavery. Without it, their world is going to look extremely different. So of course they want to do whatever it takes to protect it, and one of those things that they believe is secession. So they attempt to create their own country, the Confederate States of America, but the first state to secede, they secede in December of 1860, just a few weeks after Lincoln is elected. Who's the first state?
South Carolina.
South Carolina, there you go. South Carolina is our sister state to the north, and if you go up there on that wall and you look over the edge, the land that you see on the other side of the river, that is South Carolina. And so yes, when South Carolina secedes, however, it kicks off an entire crisis. The United States Army occupies Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, Fort Sumter being a sister fort of Fort Pulaski. And so that entire crisis plays out for several months, but even just the initial occupation causes fears across the state of Georgia. See, Georgia wants to secede too, but they don't want what's happening up there in Charleston to happen here. And so before Georgia votes to secede from the United States, the governor of the state is going to order the Georgia State Militia to seize Fort Pulaski for the state. So, January 3rd, 1861, 150 Georgia State militiamen get in rowboats, row down the South Channel of the Savannah River, land here on Cockspur Island, and they are going to come charging up that sally port that you all walked into today. Is there a battle? No, there's not a battle, unfortunately. Okay, so then why isn't there a battle? How many United States soldiers are in here? One. One guy. And so he'll peel out of Dodge, and this fort now becomes a Georgia state fort. 2 weeks later, Georgia votes to secede from the United States. And when that happens, then this fort will slowly transition into becoming a Confederate fort. Those initial 150 men in here, they're going to need a lot more guys than that. So ultimately, there'll be about 385 Confederates here in this fort. And they got a lot of work to do. The moat, it's been filled in. They got to re-dig it, re-dredge it, get more water in it. They got to fix the dike and drainage system out here. And then they got to prepare this fort for war, because they know it's only a matter of time before the United States is coming to get their fort back. And so one of the things that they're going to do is they're going to erect blindage. What in the world is blindage? Well, if you see that green wall over there behind some of you guys, it seems a little out of place, does it not? Well, that blindage is essentially composed of 17-foot long tall pine poles. And they would have put that all around the inside of the fort to protect the interior walls from any cannonballs that would come over the walls, bounce across the parade ground, and potentially damage the brick. On top of that, they are also going to dig trenches throughout this parade ground, and if you look closely, you can actually see the undulations still in the ground where some of those trenches were. And so what those were called shot catchers, to prevent all of those cannonballs from bouncing, hopefully to catch them, to prevent that from happening. Then they got to clean a bunch of cannons. They're rusty, but some of them don't even work. So they got to get those cannons out of there and get new cannons in here, plus all the ammunition for them. This is going to be a lot of work. So they got about 200 enslaved men in here, essentially the second generation of guys that built this fort. They're going to come in here and help them build all of this stuff. But kind of like I said before, change is a-coming, because yes, the United States is coming to get this fort back. So in November 1861, 2,000 United States infantrymen land over there on Tybee Island. You'll see it's about a mile and a half or so away from this island that we're on right now, Cockspur Island. No matter how big the cannon, a spherical projectile like this isn't going to be able to be fired more than a mile. So, can the smoothbore cannons inside Fort Pulaski reach the guns on Tybee Island? No. Can the guns on Tybee Island reach Fort Pulaski? No. Or can they? Doesn't every good story have a plot twist? This story does. And this story includes new weapons technology, hot off the press. Rifled artillery. So, when I say rifled, as the name suggests, the insides of the bores of these cannons, they're not smooth. They're rifled, meaning that there are these grooves that are carved in a spiral motion throughout the bore. It no longer fires a projectile that's spherical. It fires a projectile that looks like this. It's elongated, kind of looks like a cylinder, but it has a conical nose, which makes it much more aerodynamic. But I also want you to take a look at the little piece on the end here, this thin little ring. When it is fired, the heat from the explosion forces that thin piece of metal to expand, which then forces it into those carved grooves, so that as it travels throughout the bore, it starts to spiral. Here's the difference. 1 mile, 5. So, can the rifled cannons on Tybee Island reach Fort Pulaski now? Oh yeah, and they're gonna let them know it on April 10th, 1862. So for those 4 months that the Confederates here inside the fort were hearing all that work being done, what they were hearing was the United States on Tybee Island building these big, huge batteries. Here's the thing though, all of that work that they're doing in complete darkness. They're not even allowed to have candles. They're doing it in complete silence. They're not even allowed to whisper. In fact, the orders are given by whistle. Then, just before the sun comes up, they cover over the work that they did the night before with camouflage that they make out of palmetto branches and shrubs and ivy, so that every morning for 4 months the Confederates wake up and look over that wall. Nothing's changed. Not to them. And so all of a sudden, after the Confederates refuse to surrender the fort, all of that camouflage is going to come off that morning and reveal 36 cannons pointed at this fort. And of those 36 cannons, 10 of them are this rifle variety. And so those cannons are going to start firing at Fort Pulaski. Now, the corner that they're firing at is this corner right here, the southeastern corner of the fort, which happens to be the closest corner of the fort to the rifled cannons on Tybee Island, just a mile and a half away. Wait a second. Didn't I say that these cannons can fire 5 miles? So why are they firing at the closest point of the fort? Why were they placed there? How does that make any sense? Simple answer is this. They wanted to take advantage of the sniper rifle ability of these guns to target individual cannons inside Fort Pulaski. So each of the 10 rifled guns got a specific cannon inside Fort Pulaski along these 2 walls to target specifically. And you can see whether or not that was successful if you go up on top of the wall and look at the muzzle of that cannon up there. It is an original cannon that was here during the bombardment, and it gets a direct hit on its muzzle. And you can see it's missing its muzzle. So that just is a testament to how well these rifled guns can aim at a target.